Hello everyone, Deb Floros for Jesse James Beads, and today I'm going to talk to you about designing with multi-dimensions and how to get your beads to play nicely together. Sometimes you need to do some little adjustments, and hopefully I can give you some tips and tricks to do that. So I like to work with seed beads, and I use them to add some interest and some dimension to my design. I string on the beads that I want to work with and just kind of see how they might work together, and if in fact those seed beads might actually slide into a larger hold bead. So even when I really desperately want to use a bead, it may not work with just the seed beads, so I'll need to pick another solution to work that out. I've got some occasions where I just use one bead in between, but usually I use a trio of 3. Jesse James Beads has some great seed beads you can work with, and they'll match perfectly back to bead mixes and bead strands that you might want to work with. Now, I always check out the beads and kind of take a look at the holes. So I'm seeing in that metal bead and a few other beads in this mix that the beads might be a little bit larger. The one on the left there is kind of a normal size. That one too. This flowery metal bead is bigger, and the pink one is sort of a normal size. So I size up the beads and decide which ones I want to use. Now in this case, I'm testing out the seed beads. Not going to work, so I'm grabbing some bead caps, and I put a bead cap over that metal bead with the larger hole, and my seed beads sit nicely. You can also use a thunder polish bead as a spacer bead and continue to use seed beads if you'd like. What about the boho bead? Well, boho beads unfortunately have pretty large holes, most of them. So your seed beads are going to go straight through that and actually might even get stuck in the actual bead. So you can use the thunder polish, that will work. But I like to use a bead cap on these as well. So I had a few beads stuck there. So I'm using a bead cap on either end. So you can get a really cool metal bead cap and put it on either end, and they just look really beautiful. They just even enhance those beautiful beads further. And you can see that just, stacks nicely with the seed beads and another bead. Here's some other spacer beads you might want to use, but note that these have pretty large holes as well. So you may need a solution to work with those. I've got a large ceramic bead here, and I'm taking bead caps and inverting them so that the concave end is facing upright. So the outside of that bead cap will actually go into the bead, and you can then slide your other beads on. Also, these glass beads with the metal centers, you can look for some metal spacer beads that actually have a almost bicone-ish shape to them, and string that on next to it, and that bead will sit really nicely into that large metal hole. I wouldn't recommend putting metal against glass itself, but because these have metal linings, they work pretty good. And you can then take another bead, whatever kind of bead you'd like, and slide that on next to your metal bead, and it looks really beautiful. Now, what about this long, big hole bead? I'd love to use that for an earring, so I grabbed a head pin, flat head pin, and when I slide that onto the head pin, it just goes right through. So you're going to want to use some other kind of bead at the base of your head pin. So I'm using that cool sea urchin looking metal bead again, and then I put on that large bead. And you do need to be careful about the fact that that's a crystal at the bottom. You don't want it to crack. I've got that fluted metal bead again here, and it looks like it's working, but when you actually fidget it around a little bit, it doesn't. It comes right off of that flat head pin. So how do I solve that? My favorite, daisy spacer. I love a good daisy spacer, but you have to be careful of those as well because they come in various sizes. But that actually remedied this earring design quite nicely, actually. Another design that you can try is you can use a bead cap here, and again, checking that hole, and I'm going to drape that bead cap downward so that it looks like a flower petal going downward. And then I'm going to put on a large hole bead above it. So that's going to prevent beads from sliding off of my head pin. So I've got this ceramic large hole bead. It's a smaller one. And I'm going to add on a little flower crystal bead, and it just adds some interest to the design and also make sure that things don't slide off that darn head pin. So you can also put the bead caps the quote-unquote normal way and add your large hole beads. I love the look of layering metal anyways, so when you take spacers and put them around other beads, they just add some interest and some dimension to your design. So you can take any Jesse James beads, bead strand, bead mix, and you'll have a collection of things that you can use that will help you to create those dimensional designs and solve for some of those hole differences that you might have in your beads. So check out jessijamesbeads.com to pick out your next design. And I really appreciate all of you watching. Have a fabulous day and happy designing.